I did a study once of who breaks a treaty. And I remember that with the history of China, there are concepts that I think evokes even memories of what used to be the traditional virtues of the northern countries where I come from. You keep your word, you are honest, and I remember the expression, which in Chinese was, if a treaty is in writing, it is ironclad, but even a verbal agreement is binding. And that is what in London used to be called a gentleman's agreement, which is slowly going out there, where people now, in the interest of making more money or cheating someone else, do break their word. But it was a man of honor who would do that. And I think that what you say is so interesting, because when I say we have different concepts of law in England, and America, of course, is part of that system, but also every word. I remember Dag Hammarskjöld, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who once said, when he came and gave a talk at Oxford, that, a plough in Sweden means the sort of thing you had before the combine harvester, And in some cultures, in developing countries, it obviously means something is symbolic for the essence of life. And every word should be seen in its context and in the culture that we are talking about. And if we do try to understand each other, and if we do try, if you forgive me, to pray that Madame Clinton doesn't walk into the White House, because I am personally terrified of that prospect. And I understand that I will also have to find my nuclear bunker pretty soon. Thank you.
Спасибо. Да. Что мы будем делать, конечно, если все-таки это произойдет? Пожалуйста, я вижу, в зале есть вопрос. Да, вот тяните руку. Да.
Okay, first the microphone. My name is Grigorians. I am president of the Business Finance Center. The center is in Bratislava. And right now we are actively working for the new Silk Road, which I'd like to introduce briefly. And I'd like to ask Mr. Hongbing and Mrs. Valoaya their own opinion. That is, whether the Euro-Asian Union and China could ever help us to make this objective come true. We are working with Iran, with Armenia, Georgia, Slovakia, and our idea is that Iran, Armenia have to prepare their own railway system, 3 billion investments, 3 billion euros, then ports, harbors, ships, vessels, and that in the Slovak Bratislava or Sturovo ports, we should have a huge hub, European hub. That's an interesting program. And my question is the following. What do the Chinese representative and the minister of the Euro-Asian Union think about this? I would like to get started with you, please. Yes. Well, we usually say ladies first, especially in those countries where it's dangerous to walk in the street. And this is how things go. And quite obviously, the Euro-Asian Economic Commission and the Euro-Asian Union cannot provide a concrete or economically support a project rather than another. Because, for example, we have the Euro-Asian Bank, and they are in charge of aids and development tasks and principles. But now you're asking for a funding, and you obviously have an excellent idea. So you're interested in knowing what do we think, whether we are ready to support it. Yes, indeed, we are ready to support you. And whenever we were referring to the joining in of Armenia and joining to the Euro-Asian Commission and Committee, I was in charge of that. We were saying that the entrance of Armenia within the Euro-Asian Union is going to help us solve a series of projects which were debated for some time. And the Iran-Armenian project is one of them. The main thing is that we don't understand how to implement all that, whether it's going to be a railway with lots of orders, how many goods are going to be transported. And we were saying the joining of Armenia to the Euro-Asian Union will impart a new meaning to this railway system because goods will be transported to the Euro-Asian territories and to Armenia. Now, obviously, this is something that has to be built, facilitated. We have to facilitate trading regimes, foreign trade regimes. And after the entrance of Armenia to the Euro-Asian Union, we started studying treaties and discussions in order to create a common area with Iran, an economic common area. So what can be done from the legal point of view? Well, we will definitely support the project. And as my Chinese friend said, as regards the new Silk Road, is not just a simple road that will go from Europe to Asia and back to Europe, but rather that's a road and it is going to be sided by growth hubs. So this is the right approach. We cannot just simply fund a project, but what we can do is support it for the decision-making procedures and processes. We are already doing this, and we are ready to do that again in the future. I believe that the question stays the same for you as well, I believe.
Guys, I think probably China just established the new bank AAIB, or maybe in the future, China, Russia, and other countries can combine together to establish some new institutions of financial. So if that's the case, then those institutions can issue bonds which has a AAA rating. So in current like a negative interest rate environment, I think a lot of European countries, they have a lot of money, but nowhere to spend because of the asset the return is very low. So if this kind of project, which means if you invest money, it must have a return, and the return rate will be higher compared to most of the other projects. So if the Russia and China and other countries combine their financial institution together to set up the super, like a mini World Bank, something like that, it can issue a lot of the bond, which with a top rating, and you can finance the project, any project, the railway system, the seaport system, with very low financial cost. I think probably that's a more concrete way to help the project like you mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Спасибо, да, это действительно конкретный подход. Вот есть вопрос, прошу вас.
Sono Seralia di Radio Nazionale Veneta. Niente, volevo chiedere.
I would just like to say one thing. Definitely the Silk Road is oriented towards the railway system mostly, but I do not think that China has given up the maritime activities because otherwise we wouldn't understand the Cambodian port interest or the Djibouti port, and no one would ever understand the interest they have in the doubling of the Suez Canal. I believe that the Silk Road is definitely the Silk Road as far as railway road systems, but there is a complementary Silk Road in the maritime area, and that both could stand as elements of development for Europe, for the Middle East, and Africa as well. And the natural outlet of the road silk, the maritime road silk, should be represented by a hub, a port in Venice or maybe in the high Adriatic area, and should be transformed into the southern route. I do not think that there has been a giving up of the maritime Silk Road. I believe that that's only a complement to what I believe I receive as information from the Chinese government. Thank you. Well, a nice answer. I could like to say that that's a replica, an answer. But why Venice? I could say, why not Genoa? Or I apologize for saying that in Venetian, but I believe that our Chinese guests should comment on that. In realtà, se guardiamo alla storia, nel corso dell'inizio del XX secolo, i tedeschi hanno cercato di ostacolare l'impero britannico che ha portato alla Prima Guerra Mondiale e i cinesi adesso non vogliono opporsi agli Stati Uniti né sfidarlo.
30 years, I think the Chinese government, they have no intention, definitely 100% no intention to challenge that. If we stick with the marine Silk Road, which means China and the United States will have a direct conflict in the South China Sea, which we've already seen what happens. So the Chinese government, I should say, ask the help from the Putin to help China in the South China Sea, to get help from the Russia. Why? Because China do not have enough power to have direct conflict, to have direct confrontation with the United States. It's definitely not the China's goal. So if that's the case, if you want to challenge the ocean trade route, which means you direct challenge the United States on the sea, which is not allowed, which means must be the big war. It's not like a Syria war. I think it should be the World War III. So if that's not the case, China, I think that China probably the only possible or realistic way is by the land, not by the sea. Of course, you can try. You can set up a lot of seaport, which is tentative, or you just do some testing to see what's the reaction of the United States. If there's no strong reactions, then you can push forward. If there's a very strong military reactions, then you stop. You just go by the land. So I think land probably the only way it's possible for China, because it's remote. It's isolated from United States naval power. I think that's probably only solution. And besides, Russia and China, the two big land power, can work together to protect this route. So I think that's it's more realistic to to go by this way. Thank you.
Алексей, можно?
Спасибо, да. Как говорится, мы-то с вами далеки от Соединенных Штатов, но 6 флотов Соединенных
Non traducono.
кто контролирует морские торговые пути, тот, в общем, контролирует и мировую торговлю. Татьяна Дмитриевна, прошу вас.
Я хотела бы добавить, вот летом этого года господин Проди проводил, его организация проводила очень интересную конференцию как раз в Венеции, посвященную шелковому пути. Была очень интересная конференция.
Now, obviously, this is devoted to the Silk Road. It was interesting, very interesting discussion. And we know that at the time of Marco Polo, 100% of the trade between Europe and Asia was served by the terrestrial road. And now 90% of the trade between Asia and the rest of the world is 90% covered by sea. So the balance is totally different. And my colleague, the Italian colleague, is completely right. This conference saw a very interesting, impressive contribution, especially as far as the maritime Venetian port. He's right. Now, why Venice and not Genoa? Well, because this will not take the entire tour or detour of the Italian peninsula. That was a good presentation. And initially we said that this is not an alternative. It's not going to exclude or give up the maritime way or road in favor of the terrestrial one. We know that as far as the Silk Road, there is the maritime road, Silk Road, the terrestrial Silk Road, and I believe that there is enough space for both, enough room for both, but we have to regain a balance, which is what we are missing. And modern technologies, expectations, entail consumers' expectations, which are rather oriented to the increase of transportation. So there is no contradiction. Many thanks. By now we have to conclude the debate. We may make lots of inferences, But we do have to realize what's going on, and we haven't really worked upon our own reactions. The strengthening of infrastructures, of economic roads and pathways are the right method to strengthen the component which is truly political. So I make my wishes to succeed, and many thanks now, and see you again in this arena.